Hello and welcome to our channel where we dive deep into the heart of classic literature. Today we're journeying into the enigmatic world of one of America's most celebrated poets, Emily Dickinson. We'll be exploring one of her most famous and hauntingly beautiful works, Because I Could Not Stop for Death. This poem is a masterclass in confronting one of life's greatest inevitabilities, not with fear, but with a strange, quiet civility. So, grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's unravel the profound mysteries Dickinson has woven into these timeless verses. The poem begins with an unforgettable line. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Right from the start, Dickinson personifies death. This isn't the grim reaper with a scythe we often imagine. Instead, death is a gentleman, a suitor perhaps. He's kindly. This choice of word is crucial. It sets a tone that is calm and accepting, rather than terrifying. The speaker is too busy with the hustle and bustle of life to think about death, a sentiment many of us can relate to. So death, ever the patient gentleman, takes the initiative. He arrives in a carriage, and the speaker puts away her labor and her leisure too, signifying a complete departure from the mortal world and all its concerns. What's fascinating here is the immediate sense of journey. The carriage ride isn't a violent abduction. It's a slow, deliberate procession. Dickinson writes, "We slowly drove. He knew no haste. This is not a race against time. It's a journey outside of it." The pace is gentle, allowing the speaker to observe the world she is leaving behind. And she's not alone. The carriage holds just ourselves and immortality. Immortality is personified as a third passenger, a chaperone of sorts. This inclusion is brilliant. It tells us that this journey isn't just about ending life. It's about beginning something else, something eternal. The presence of immortality from the very beginning frames the entire experience, not as an end, but as a transition. As they travel, the poem takes us through a symbolic landscape representing the stages of life. They pass the school, where children strove, at recess, in the ring. This image represents childhood, a time of organized play, innocence and learning. The children are striving, full of life and energy, a stark contrast to the speaker's passive journey away from it all. It's a poignant look back at the beginning of life's journey, seen now from its very end. The memory is vivid, yet distant, like watching a scene from a life that is no longer hers. Next, the carriage moves past the fields of gazing grain. This image evokes maturity and the prime of life. The grain is ripe, full, and gazing, as if it's watching them pass by. This represents the productive adult years, a time of growth and harvest. It's the period where one is fully engaged in the work and sustenance of life. By passing these fields, the speaker is leaving behind her own ripeness, her own period of full bloom. The progression is logical and chronological, moving from the morning of life towards its evening. Then they pass the setting sun. This is the most direct symbol for the end of a day, and by extension the end of life. The journey, which started in the metaphorical morning of the schoolyard, now reaches its twilight. The sun is setting on the speaker's mortal existence. This natural, daily cycle of the sun mirrors the natural cycle of life and death, reinforcing the idea that this transition is an ordinary, universal part of the cosmic order. There's a sense of inevitability here, but it's a gentle, natural one, not a frightening one. However, the mood begins to shift. Dickinson writes, or rather, he passed us. The speaker corrects herself. The sun didn't just set, it passed them. This subtle shift suggests they have now moved beyond the earthly realm, beyond the measure of time as we know it. The dews drew quivering and chill, and the speaker's clothing becomes inadequate. She mentions her gossamer gown and tulle tippet garments more suited for a wedding or a ball than a cold evening. This detail is layered with meaning. It could suggest she was unprepared for this journey, or perhaps it hints at the idea of death as a bridegroom, and this journey as a sort of macabre wedding procession, uniting her with eternity. The chill she feels is the coldness of the grave, the physical reality of death finally setting in. The journey's destination is then revealed. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. This house is, of course, the grave. Dickinson's description is understated yet powerful. The roof is scarcely visible and the cornice in the ground. It's a home, but one integrated into the earth itself. It's a final resting place, but the use of the word house domesticates it, making it seem less like a terrifying void and more like a final, quiet dwelling. This is where the slow carriage ride ends. The speaker has been escorted to her new home by her courteous guide, Death. The final stanza makes a breathtaking leap in time. Since then, tea is centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day. I first surmised the horses' heads were toward eternity. Centuries have passed since that fateful day, yet to the speaker, it feels like less than a single day. This is the poem's ultimate revelation. Once she entered this new state of being, time became meaningless. The moment she realized the carriage was headed not just to a grave, but toward eternity, was the most significant moment of all. That single day of her death contains more weight and significance than all the centuries of her afterlife. This final stanza beautifully encapsulates the poem's central theme. The journey with death was a transition into a timeless realm. In eternity, human concepts like centuries and days lose their meaning. The speaker's consciousness now exists outside of linear time. The entire poem, with its slow, measured pace, was a preparation for this final understanding. The shock is not in dying, but in the realization of what comes after. A state so vast and different that our mortal measurements simply don't apply. So, what makes Because I Could Not Stop for Death so enduring? It's Dickinson's radical reimagining of death. She transforms a subject of fear and dread into a calm, orderly, and almost courtly experience. Death is not a violent end, but a gentleman caller who escorts us on a final, reflective journey. The poem moves through life stages, childhood, adulthood, old age, with a sense of peaceful finality. The genius of the poem lies in its tone and perspective. The speaker is telling this story from a place of timelessness, looking back on her own death with a serene, detached wisdom. This perspective allows us, the readers, to contemplate our own mortality without the usual panic. Dickinson invites us to see death not as a failure or a tragedy, but as a natural, necessary transition into a different state of existence. Furthermore, the poem's symbolism is incredibly rich yet accessible. The school, the grain, the setting sun, these are universal images that immediately resonate. Her use of personification, giving death and immortality human-like qualities, makes abstract concepts tangible and approachable. And the final twist, where centuries feel shorter than a day, leaves us with a profound sense of awe and mystery about what lies beyond our earthly perception. Emily Dickinson's life was one of seclusion, but her mind roamed freely through the biggest questions of existence: life, love, nature, and of course death and immortality. In Because I Could Not Stop for Death, she offers us a unique and comforting vision. It's a poem that doesn't provide easy answers, but instead changes the way we ask the questions. It encourages a quiet contemplation of the inevitable, suggesting that perhaps the journey into the unknown is not one to be feared, but one to be met with grace and civility. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of literature's greatest poems. It is a reminder that poetry has the power to change our perspective on even the most daunting aspects of the human experience. What are your thoughts on this poem? Do you find its vision of death comforting or unsettling? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your interpretations. And if you enjoyed this analysis, Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more explorations of classic literature. We'll see you in the next one.